Welcome everyone to this is Vancouver Financial Mastery Meetup. We are privileged today to hear Mr. Aaron Kopelow speak about grants, training grants, small business grants. And I'm not going to go into details of the meetup group itself. I think most of you have been to some of our other events, but I know everyone on the call is a business owner or a small business owner, and I know this is something that you would find of huge benefit. So I will ask Aaron to introduce himself, and I'm looking
Sure, yeah.
forward to the presentation. And everyone is going to be on mute.
Okay, wonderful. Can you hear me, Alexi? Does that sound good? Yeah, okay. Yeah, really excited to be here today. I want to get into some really fantastic grant programs that hopefully some of you will be able to access. Before I do that, I want to give a quick introduction to myself, my background. So I actually graduated from UBC Engineering in 2019. I started out working, once I graduated, I started out working in civil for a civil construction company, a company that builds roads and bridges and highways. And I worked there for almost a year, and I found that I really didn't enjoy it, and it wasn't my passion. And I decided that I was going to drop engineering, and I still wanted to be a problem solver. I really got into engineering because of the problem solving aspect, and I wanted to continue doing that, but I wanted to do social problem solving rather than technical problem solving. And so I took a look online for jobs and opportunities, and I stumbled upon something, an opportunity to become a account manager for a company that did grant consulting. And I had no idea what that even was or how that works. And so that really interested me, and I went for the interview. I got the job, and I still didn't really, from the first day, I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into. But as I started to learn more and more, I became really excited by how much funding there was available specifically for for-profit businesses, because everybody knows nonprofits and grants, but something that really surprised me was that how much funding there was available from the government for for-profit businesses. And so what was even more surprising was, as I began talking to business owners like yourselves and other professionals, I was shocked to hear that they didn't know what was available, and that people who were eligible and could access these programs, they had no idea what was out there. And so that really inspired me to learn more and to get to work. And so in the first half of 2020, I ended up getting over $500,000 in subsidies for businesses from all sorts of industries. So meal prep, delivery services, software, accounting, and even boat building. So all over the place, almost any industry is eligible for this kind of funding. And as I got better and better at the job and more passionate about it, I realized, hey, this is something I really enjoy and that I'm good at, and that I want to take to the next level. And so I decided to start out on my own, start my own business, and that's how GrantFinders was born. So that's my story, and I could ramble on about the different programs that are available, but I find, especially over Zoom, it's generally a more engaging and interesting conversation if people, or if it becomes a conversation, other people get involved, and we can start looking at your businesses and what kind of issues you're having, and then hopefully providing some solutions in the form of grants and other opportunities that could help solve some of those problems. So I was hoping for a volunteer, maybe Alexi, that would make sense. I know your business is financial planning, investments, insurance, taxes. So I was hoping I could ask you a few questions, and we go back and forth a little bit, and then see
Absolutely.
if I could propose some interesting programs for you.
Sure.
So my first question for you would be, have you ever applied for grant funding before?
Nope, never heard that there are grants
Mhm.
that I could be applying for. So,
Okay.
no.
So the reason would be just lack of awareness, no information available to you regarding these types of programs.
I'm way too busy running my own business to even
Mhm.
start looking. And even if
Right.
I was to start looking, I wouldn't know where to look. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's though, and those are the reasons that I run into the most people. If you are a business owner, I mean, I've found that it is a full-time job. It's enough to run my own business just doing grants for other people. So that's a really common example of why people end up not being able to access these funds, because it is time consuming. There is a lot of research involved. And so that's a very common example. And so Alexi, if you what are some of the pain points that you have with your business and being a busy entrepreneur? Are there any areas that you wish you had more help in, or any areas of your business that you're struggling with right now?
The biggest pain point right now in my business is marketing. It's not something that I do.
Okay.
But I know this is something that I should be doing, and I don't know enough about it. But over the last couple of months, I have been trying to find. I have been fixing my website, and then also trying to find someone on actually on Upwork, basically a consultant who would come in and help me structure my marketing strategy better.
Okay, sure. And so my next question for you would be, have you ever hired an internship or a student to help out with some of the workload at your company?
I have hired a few people as marketing assistants in the past. A few 2 years ago, and then one person last year, but it hasn't really worked out. So I'm
Okay.
not. Yeah.
And why not?
So partially it's because I'm not exactly sure what I have to do or had to
Right.
do. So
Mhm.
I didn't really have a vision, and the person that I hired wasn't what's the word, proficient enough to create the vision for myself and then to implement it for me. Number one. Number two, I had someone coming in on part-time basis, and even though I
Mhm.
was paying them the market rate or whatever the market rate would be for a marketing person,
Mhm.
but both individuals were able to find full-time job, and they would prefer a full-time job as opposed to my part-time one.
Absolutely. Okay, sure. So, sounds like there's a couple different issues there, but the part-time, generally people hire part-time because full-time wage is a lot to take on.
Exactly.
And so something that's interesting with hiring university students is that there are subsidies available to cover up to 75% of the wages. And so if you knew that was available, and if you knew how to access that, you could bring them on for full-time, and you could have a lot more flexibility with how much those people were able to take on, and maybe build the strategy from there. Um, but I'll get into that a little bit more later. I'll continue with some of my questions here. So, in terms of switching gears a little bit, in terms of training, have you ever spent money on training for yourself to learn new skills, or for your employees? So whether that's professional development courses, new like a technical skills course, or a leadership or management skills.
Yes.
And you have, okay. So what are
Uh,
some of the examples that you've done?
all the time, all the time. In fact, I have a budget for it. I have an educational budget, and it's about 5% of my income, of my company
Okay.
income. But no, I'm a big believer in it. I was actually at a conference this morning, but I'm pursuing a designation. I'm writing an exam in a week, so I'm a full big believer in in education and building, uh, bringing value by understanding more things. So yes, that's huge in my business.
Sure. So you're pursuing a designation, and do you mind me asking what that's for
Yeah, yeah.
specifically?
So I'm right now, actually. So next week I'm writing an exam for my CLU, which is the Certified Life Underwriter designation, and this is the designation that helps me deal with very complicated insurance cases and estate planning and using insurance in corporate settings for the
Mhm.
benefit of the client.
Okay,
It's
great.
complicated, I have to say. Yeah, that's why I'm taking
Yeah,
courses on it.
yeah, sure, sure. So, and then for employees, have you ever had employees take similar types of training?
Yes, I have one employee right now, and she's taking courses quite frequently as well. Yes.
Okay, sure.
Uh, and I can't. Yes, and yes, and I do pay for those courses.
Hmm. Okay. Great. You're giving me a lot to work with here. I think I'll start getting into some of the programs that you could be accessing, just because I've seen some really great examples. So I'll start with the BC Employer Training Grant. So this grant is specifically for employees to learn new skills so that they can improve their income and their job security. And the training does need to be provided through a third party rather than just routine internal training that's always done when you bring on a new employee. And the training provider, it can be public, it can be private. It just has to have enough information online or provided by the training provider to put together a course outline that shows what the deliverables are, what you're actually going to be learning, and how that's relevant to your position. The other thing is it's not retroactive. You do have to apply before the start date of the course. But as long as you do that, there is funding available. And so the amount depends on the individual that's taking the training and what the training is for. So there is 100% coverage of the course for training low-skilled employees. So if you're training laborers or cleaners, that's 100% coverage. If you're taking a course that's technical, say you want to learn about digital marketing, data analytics, some Google ads, 80% of the course is going to be covered in that situation, to a maximum of $10,000 per person per year. And then for all other courses, professional development, anything that's not technical or not for somebody who's a low-skilled worker, is 60% covered. So you can apply for 60% coverage of the course tuition to a maximum of $5,000 per person per year. So for the example that you presented there, the CLU designation, you would need to, I'm not sure how you sign up for that exactly. In terms of this grant, you have to apply on a course by course basis. So if there's multiple courses that make up one designation, you would need to apply separately for the different courses, but that's something you could be eligible for. I'm not sure exactly what courses your employee was taking, but if they want to take skills, sounds like digital marketing is something that you could do with somebody in your team that knows a little bit more about that. There's a company called BrainStation that does online virtual training. Those courses, I've gotten 80% coverage for any of the technical training that's offered in BrainStation. So that's huge for small businesses like yourself that want to, you'd love to learn those extra skills, but it's expensive to try and to get your employees to take all these different courses. It does add up. So having 80% of the course tuition covered can make a huge difference.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is really interesting. But so can I apply to some of this myself, or this is only for employees or new coming employees?
So in BC, what's great about BC is that they do allow for owners to apply for this training. This is a program. So the BC Employer Training Grant is part of the Canada Job Grant. If you Google Canada Job Grant, that's kind of the well-known version, and it's a federal program. But what happens to that money is it gets split up through the different provinces. So I don't know where Aurora and Slava, where you guys are. If you're in BC, then this BC Employer Training Grant is relevant for you. But in Alberta, there's the Alberta Job Grant. In Ontario, there's the Ontario Job Grant. So the rules are slightly different depending on the province. But yes, in BC, they do allow owners to apply for this.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And by the way, yes, so Slava and Aurora are in BC, at least as far as I know.
Sure.
For now.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I work on this grant across Canada, but yes, this the funding that I was just talking about is specifically for BC, so that's perfect. Do you have any questions about that program for now?
It sounds actually very interesting. Yeah. So potentially, just for the sake of argument,
Yeah.
I had a marketing assistant who could have benefited from taking some of these courses. So potentially, if I understand you correctly, we could have applied to, let's say, BrainStation, which I'm familiar with. I think I've come across one of their courses. So we could have taken a course through BrainStation. The course would have been paid 80% by the government. 20% would come out of my pocket, but at least my employee would be whatever, they would benefit from it. Am I understanding you correctly? Okay.
Yeah, you do. I guess the one point that might be slightly different is that you do have to pay for the course yourself. You need to pay for the cost fully within 30 days of the start date of the course.
Yes.
And then if you submit the receipt and the proof of payment for reimbursement. So you do need to have the funding to be able to pay for it up front.
Yeah.
And then once you're approved and the course is finished, then it takes about 2 weeks to get the reimbursement process sorted and get the refund as a check. from this program. So that's kind of with grants in general. You have to have it's not like an angel investment type thing. Like you have to have the money to spend. You spend the
Yeah.
money. If it's a hiring grant, you spend the money on the wages, and then they reimburse you after the fact. So that's kind of with hiring and training grants, that's a good rule of thumb to keep in mind.
Interesting. I got two more questions. Question one.
Sure.
So the person that I had working for me, does it matter what kind of relationship it is, as in subcontractor versus full-time versus part-time?
So yeah, so again, another good rule of thumb with grants is they have to be an employee of the business. So if you're hiring somebody, or if you're getting them training, they have to be on your payroll. They have to be an actual employee with a T4. It can't be someone who's on a contract, because then they're not your employee. They're a contractor.
Gotcha. But part-time, full-time doesn't, as long as they're on payroll,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
they would qualify. Interesting.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
One other question is, how about family members? So let's say if I have my wife working for me, can I send her to BrainStation?
So with family members, it depends if they're part owners of the business. If they're not owners of the business, there may be an issue. If they are owners, then it's seen, then it's okay, basically. So as long as they have some ownership stake in the business, then it's okay.
Interesting. Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
And by the way, for everyone else on the call, if you want to type in, well, you could potentially unmute your mic, or you can just type in your questions in the chat window, and
and we can
we'll,
pause at the end, and I think there'll be time at the end to go over
for
questions
sure.
as well. So
Very interesting.
yeah, and the other thing that you mentioned that triggered something for me was that that you do have to be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident as well.
Yeah.
So for the next program I was going to talk about, with the student work placement programs, people often want to hire international students. Unfortunately, that's not going to be subsidized, because these are government programs. The government of Canada wants people who are Canadian citizens or permanent residents or protected refugees. So that's another kind of blanket rule for grants as well. And leading into that, I'll get into the student work placement program. So if you do want to hire a student and get that extra support, especially for businesses that are a little bit more seasonal, if you have a busy period in the summer and you just need some extra pair of hands, you can bring on, if you want to bring on somebody who is Canadian and attends a Canadian post-secondary school, you can bring them on for an internship or a co-op placement. Like I said before, you do have to hire them as an employee rather than a contractor. And the funding is for 4-month periods. If you want to keep them on longer than 4 months, that's fine, but you'd have to apply for another grant. And so because of COVID this year, everybody that applied was given 75% wage subsidy that maxes out at $7,500 for a student hiring grant. Next year, what the normal is, I'm not sure what they're going to do next year, but what the normal program was before COVID was that it was 50% wage subsidy. And then if you were hiring from a minority group, so if you're hiring a woman, or if you're hiring a recent immigrant or someone with a disability from a minority group, then it was the 75% wage subsidy. So still yet to be seen what they're going to do in the new year. Because of COVID, they might keep it the same. But this year, and even from January to April this year, if you want to hire a student, 75% wage subsidy. So that's another great program. And the one I would recommend for that is called Magnet, the Magnet Student Work Placement Program, simply because they allow for students from any type of discipline, whereas some student hiring grants are only for technical students, for technical roles, and some are for environmental roles. But basically, it's there's a whole different bunch of delivery organizations that are available. Another program that's super interesting and relevant to you as well, Lexi, is the Digital Skills for Youth program. So this year, that was created, or it was always created, but it was doubled in funding this year because of COVID. And so this is for hiring youth aged 15 to 30 years old that have graduated from a post-secondary program and are being hired in a tech-related role. So whether it's social media or digital marketing or programming, app design, they were offering this year up to $30,000 in a 100% wage subsidy for 6 months of work.
Wow.
So this program was huge this year. People were jumping all over it because normally it's $15,000, and they doubled it to 30. So again, I don't know what they're going to do next year. It's very interesting with COVID. I think the government has a strategy to try and pump money into these grants because that's a good way of boosting the economy. But you'll have to stay tuned on that. But it definitely will be renewed in some sense at April 1st, 2021. And that's the government fiscal year, the start of the government fiscal year. So for grants, that's an important date to look out for. March 31st is when everything ends, and then April 1st is when the new programs are refunded.
Aaron, can you elaborate on how would it work? So if I want to hire a student, where do I go looking for a student that I could potentially to put into one of these, the ones that you covered, let's say the digital skill for youth or the other program?
Sure, yeah. So another great thing about these programs is they have job boards built into them. So when you apply, you can include a posting as part, and so it'll be on their website and on their job board. What I also recommend to my customers is to make your own posting on Indeed or on wherever you like to post your jobs. LinkedIn job board and Indeed are two popular ones. And then what you do is you put a little blurb at the bottom saying this position is sponsored by, or is going to be sponsored by the government of Canada, and their requirements for this funding and for this subsidy are the following. And that's also part of what I do is help people write up the job descriptions to make sure that they're doing it correctly, and help them create these postings so that they'll attract the right people. But yeah, so that's something you can do, and you put it on Indeed where everybody can see it, but you also have that requirement, so you're filtering out and only getting people who are eligible for these types of funding programs. Does that make sense? Do you have any other questions on it?
I do. So one of the questions that of course, I want to know the answer to is how do you get paid? That you don't have to answer it now, maybe towards the end. That's one of the questions. And the other question, 1 second. Actually, no, I think that is it so far.
Sure, yeah. So I've given a kind of a general overview of the main programs that I think are a good match specifically for you, Alexi. There's a few others depending on, for agriculture businesses. There's the YESP program, which is for like $14,000 to hire anybody in an agriculture related role. There's youth hiring programs just for unemployed youth in general that offer money as well. So it depends. The best thing to do is yeah, I'm happy to answer emails or questions after for specific situations. But yeah, I've given kind of just a general idea of what's available. What I do is primarily research. So I spend a lot of time looking for the best programs, making connections with the delivery organizations. So I have contacts there, and I'm aware of when funding is opening up, when it's closing, how much is left. And what I do with my customers is I match them to the best programs for their eligibility, and then provide them with overviews of the programs that they might be a good match for. So the dollar value, the eligibility, the turnaround time, expected date of reimbursement, and just how the whole overall process works. Then I'll also write the application and submit it with them. And then the other thing that people don't realize about grants is that there's a whole bunch of admin and follow-up work as well. So once you submit, and once you get approved, you still need to submit participant information forms, learning plans, pay stubs, receipts, and it can be time consuming and confusing if you've never done it before. And it can just be, if you do it incorrectly, it can be really frustrating and annoying. And that's why I think a lot of people don't end up, maybe they get approved initially, but they don't end up with the funding in the end because it's a bit of a difficult process. And so what I do is manage the entire process for you. And I also, the way I work is that it's only for approvals. It's only for approved grants. There's absolutely no fee unless I get my client, my customer approved for a grant, and then I invoice for 20% of the grant amount.
Cool. Aaron, can you talk about some of the more common grants that a typical business owner would be applying to. Let's say not myself, but for other business owners who would like to expand their team.
Sure, for expanding. Yeah, so I work in, there's two sides to what I do. One side is the training side, and that's through the Canada Job Grant and the BC Employer Training Grant. The other side is hiring. So for hiring, if you're hiring somebody that's 30 years old or younger, there's a really high probability that there's going to be a subsidy available for that. It does depend, like I say, on the industry that you're in. If there's some kind of sustainability or environmental aspect to the role, there's a whole bunch of funding available for that. If it's a tech position, if you're a tech company, if you're doing something that's innovative, there's a whole different pot of funding available for that. But yeah, in general, there's one, like I say, just purely for somebody who is a youth who is unemployed. So the Get Youth Working program is a good example of that. It offers $2,800 in a wage subsidy to help hire unemployed youth between the ages of 17 and 29. So that's really popular in construction industries because they have laborers coming in and out and seasonal and different projects. And then another one, I don't know, this is generally for larger companies that are looking to expand. But another grant that I've worked on is the Can Export grant. So if you're expanding into international markets, they do provide up to $75,000 there to cover the cost of activities involved with that. So as long as your business has less than 500 employees and an annual revenue greater than $100,000, you can get a whole wide variety of activities subsidized. Virtual trade events right now because of COVID. Normally it's in-person trade events and travel and the cost of the tickets for those. Search engine optimization for online content targeting those new export regions, adaptation of marketing tools, market research for that new market that you're breaking into internationally, as well as expert advice on intellectual property, sales, taxes, consulting, and so that's another big program available specifically for international expansion. But basically, the general idea is that there is a lot of money available for for-profit businesses, and you should really be looking into it at the very least, or trying to access some of these funds, because pretty much everybody is eligible for something at some point in time.
Fantastic. That begs the question: if let's say I'm a business owner, so I am a business owner, but let's say I decide to hire someone and I decide to apply for one of these grants. And without you being, so let's say I meet with you and you say, okay, Alexa, you apply to this grant, that grant. How much do you think it would take for me? I'm not in the industry. How much would it take to do the whole process, to apply to one of these grants and to follow up and to do everything that needs to be done?
Sure. Yeah. So my job is to make grants more accessible. If people want to take on the work of applying for the grant and doing the admin, I'm more than happy for them to do that. And I'm more than happy to have a conversation with anybody here just about the programs that are available and how to best access those. What I find is a lot of people like yourselves are too busy to do the research that's involved. For instance, within the Digital Skills for Youth program, the one that was offering $30,000 this year, there's a whole bunch of different delivery organizations. They offer different amounts of funding. They offer different eligibility criteria for different areas of Canada. And so it can start to really build up in work. For that one specifically, it could have been quite a project to try and get your hands on that money. Whereas on the other side with the Get Youth Working grant, if you've done it before and if you know the program exists and you're comfortable filling out grants and application forms, and that's something you're familiar with, then I would just recommend that you do it on your own. And for any of these programs, I could recommend, I'm happy to send a link and show you where it is and how to access it, and try doing it on your own and seeing, because it's so individual. Some people don't find this frustrating or difficult at all. And some people are like, you know what, I don't have the time for this. It's really hard for me to say, which kind of person that you're going to be. I'm happy to get anybody. The goal of my company is to get Canadians better access to grants. I'm happy for anybody to do that in whatever way is best for them. So yeah, I would recommend checking out you know, just go into the website, look at the application forms. If it seems like something that's easy, go for it. And the admin part will, if you're familiar with that and you're comfortable with that, it probably won't be that much of a headache for you. If it looks like something that's confusing and complicated and is starting to stress you out, then it might be a good idea to talk to me and have me help you get some of that free money. Especially if it's an activity that you already do, that you're already spending on, then it's really kind of a no-brainer, right? Because you could be saving, even with myself taking or charging a fee, you're still saving a whole bunch of money at the end of the day. So
that's great. And Aaron, you did mention, so I understand you are in British Columbia, but for, let's say, those of my clients who are business owners outside of British Columbia, you take care of grants all over the country, correct?
yeah, like I said, a lot of these programs are federal programs. There's a few that are specifically BC, which can be handy, especially if the federal ones start to run out of money. Then I switch over and start looking at provincial grants and build that strategy. But yeah, so I'm very familiar with the provincial programs for BC. I'm very familiar. I'm based in Vancouver, and then federal programs in general, I'm very familiar with those as well. Province by province, like I would say, like Ontario provincial grants, I'm less familiar with that. So there's, I guess, a little bit of gap there. But I also work with individuals who do this sort of, like I have connections and relationships with other people across Canada who are doing this. So if you're not the right fit for me, I'm happy to refer your clients or anyone who's interested to somebody who might know more as well.
Fantastic. And how can people get in touch with you? So other than Googling your company's name, what's the best way?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can just post my email in like grantfinders.ca is the best way. It's just because it'll be easiest for you to fill out the if you click on the get started and the contact form there. That's kind of the easiest way, and then we can schedule a call. But I'll also put my email in the chat here, aaron@grantfinders.ca. And I'm happy to correspond over email with anybody who has questions at all.
Fantastic. No, that sounds great. I would like to open the board to questions to Aaron. So yeah, just please unmute your mic and go ahead with your question.
Hi, Aaron. So I'm Aurora, and I have a business that I launched in March of this year, so just as COVID happened. It's an e-commerce selling sustainable activewear made, manufactured by hand in East Vancouver.
Okay.
I'm working full time, and I do this on the side, which is evening and weekend whenever I can. Mm-hmm. I have to say it's been very, very slow because obviously selling activewear at the same price as Lululemon, whenever you're not able to touch the quality of the material and to really understand the fit and everything, has been pretty hard, I think, on my business. I was meant to do some markets, which have obviously been cancelled. I'm struggling with doing everything myself. By everything I'm talking about, from production, sourcing to, as Alexi was saying, marketing, like advertising, everything. So what I need help with is basically someone to create a marketing campaign, someone that has a vision, because I'm not able to figure this out myself, and that's what has been more time consuming. And as Alexi was saying, hiring students is great, and I think a lot of people who do have a lot of time on their hands should be doing so, to give them the experience and coach them and meet them. But as I said, I'm really tight on time, so I do need to hire someone that know what they are doing, and I know it's going to maximize not only my time but also that the strategy is going to be in tip-top shape, so I can get some return on investment pretty quickly. So because I'm self-funded, my budget is pretty limited, and except outside of the Upwork of the world of Fiverr or all that kind of thing, I just wondered if you had any advice on where to get started.
Sure. Yeah. So one thing that just clicked when you said March, a lot of these programs, they do want to see that you've been operating for at least a year. So if you're because startups can be risky, and so the government doesn't want to invest in companies that might suddenly go bust. But you're close to the timeline there of especially having your end of year come up in March, and then April is when all the new programs get renewed. That's good timing. And the program I think is interesting for you is Digital Skills for Youth. So that one is for recent graduates that are 30 years old or younger. So it's a bit of a compromise. I understand that having students can be time consuming to train them and bring them up to speed. But this one is for recent graduates. So maybe they're not seasoned professionals, but if you get somebody at 28, 29, 30 years old, they've got a few years of experience. They still know, especially because people my age, like growing up now, you're immersed in this stuff all the time. They still have quite a bit of experience with doing social media and digital marketing. And so this program, while it does require you to bring them on as employees and pay the wages up front, it does also reimburse every month. So at the end of the month, you get reimbursed for the wages that you paid. And this year, like I said, it was up to $30,000 in 100% wage subsidy for 6 months. So that really lowers the risk of bringing on somebody who's a recent graduate as well, because if they're not the right fit, it's 100% wage subsidy. So you didn't, unless you, yeah, I mean, there's very low risk. If it's not a right fit, then you can let them go after 6 months and you haven't lost any money. On the other hand, if you really like their work, then you've gotten 6 months for free. And now you've got a candidate who you didn't have to pay anything other than your time to train up and get familiar with your business. And now you can continue to work with them further on. Like, it doesn't have to stop at that 6 months. The funding will stop there, but you can continue to hire them and continue to employ them for as long as you want. The other thing is this can be for part-time work as well. So you don't have to bring them on for full-time. It can be for part-time. It can be remote. It's very flexible. So I would say the Digital Skills for Youth program for you sounds like the best match there.
Thank you. And you said part-time. Is there a minimum of hours required to be able to benefit from this grant?
Depends on the program. Yeah, it really depends on the program. And again, that's part of what I do is if someone says, hey, I only want 20 hours, I try and find the right delivery organization that will allow that. I know for the student ones, like if they're still a student, they're very flexible on that. I don't think it matters. Like for some, I know some programs that it doesn't matter how many hours it is. For the recent graduates, I do think it has to be at least 30 hours a week for that one. So like I say, it does depend on the delivery organization that you're working with. So there's some kind of research and background involved there.
So if I go to that Digital Skills for Youth website, I will find the various delivery organization.
Yeah, Google Digital Skills for Youth, you'll see it's a federal program. So you'll see the federal government website and they'll list a bunch of different delivery organizations. And then within those organizations, they have different eligibility and rules. And yeah, that's a good place to get started for sure.
That's great. Thank you.
Slava, did you have any questions for me?
No, I just wanted to thank you, Aaron. It was very helpful. All the information, we made a lot of notes, and
Sure.
We'll definitely do something with that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure, of course. If you have any questions that come up once you start looking into these applications and find any points of confusion, I'm happy to follow up and help out.
Yeah,
I have
that's great.
overviews written up and created for all these different programs for the different delivery organizations specifically. So outlining the eligibility for each delivery organization.
Oh, that's great. That's amazing.
I'm happy to share that with you. So please do follow up Aaron at GrantFinders.ca. And I'll help
What's
you.
the website, Aaron?
My email is aaron@grantfinders.ca and the website is grantfinders.ca. So either of those places you can contact me.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. We'll definitely will.
Yeah.
Aaron, I have a question, sorry, regarding the
Sure.
delivery organization and their internship opportunities. I'm on the website right now. Would you
Mhm.
suggest that I contact the delivery organization prior to April 1st, or just
So
on the 1st of April?
what they do there, I would recommend, what I do personally for my customers and for my clients is I call the delivery organization, and I keep calling them until they give me an actual contact, an actual person that is involved in the process and that knows when the funding is going to be renewed. And I check in with them regularly to find out when it's coming out, because as soon as they open it up on the website, it goes quickly. It's very, time is very important. When you apply is very important. So you need to be constantly tracking and on top of it. And so, yes, I would suggest calling the delivery organizations, getting a contact there that actually knows when the funding is going to come out again, putting your name down on a wait list, putting your information in early. All of those are really good kind of basic steps to make sure you're going to get access to the funding.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
Fantastic. If there are no other questions, then Aaron, I have to thank you for your time. This was very interesting for me and new, but I think realizing that there are things out there and realizing that simply because I never bothered looking or I never had the time to look, I think it's very, it's great to know that it's there, and at least we now have a connection to that world in case questions run up. And I do have your contact information, and of course people can find you through GrantFinders.ca. So this has been really helpful.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm really glad that you guys got value from it. And yeah, the role of my job and my business is to make grants more accessible. So let me know if there's any opportunity for me to help you do that, or for anyone that you're connected with, or anybody at all. Thank you very much for having me, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Thank you so very much.
We'll probably do a few more of these maybe later in the year, just for other people, other business owners. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.